In this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to create a flying saucer, a real basic flying saucer in Blender, so that you can use it for composites and add it to other video. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. I'm going to do File, New, and walk you through just the basics of Blender. So this is the Blender environment. I'm holding the middle mouse button right now. Middle mouse button is how I can orbit around. And if I do scroll the middle mouse button, I can zoom in and out on this. If I hold Shift, then I can slide left and right, up and down, while holding the middle mouse button. And that's how you can kind of move around. I'm viewing from this view here. This is how I can also control it by grabbing this little gizmo here. And if I wanted to view from this device, this is the camera. I click the camera right here, and now I'm viewing the scene from the camera. So if I were to export this, this is what I would see. I wouldn't see what's in the dark area outside, just what's in that light area. And if I click any one of these axes, then I can view it from that axis. But if I want to just rotate or pivot my view, I'm just holding that middle mouse button. We'll get into the camera a little bit later. So for right now, we're just going to ignore that. We're not going to be using that just yet. And I'm going to click this cube right here. It's already selected. That is the default cube. When you start Blender, it just is in there automatically. There's also a light in that world. We'll leave the light for now, and then we're going to select that default cube. And if you had a Windows, you'd hit delete. I'm going to hit X on a Mac and then delete that. So I would just have this empty world with just the light in it. So I'm going to add a mesh, and I'm going to add a UV sphere. That's going to be the basis for our flying saucer. And when I added it, I don't want to hit enter just yet because I want to make some changes to this. I want to add more faces to this mesh. So with it still selected right there, I'm going to click this, expand it, and the segments I'm going to put it on 64 segments, and the rings I'm going to put as 32. And now you'll notice that there's a lot more faces to that mesh. That'll be good for us for right now, but I want to take and I want to squash this. So I'm going to select it, and I'm going to get my scale tool right here, and then I'm going to scale it down. I'm going to just start scaling it down from the Z axis, but I'm going to come over here. I want to scale it to an exact number. So it all started at 111, and then I'm going to change this to 0.12, and now it is scaled to 0.12. So you'll notice that it is kind of a squashed sphere. And we'll use that as the beginning of our ship. Next thing I want to do is view this smooth, not with all of these panels, because I'm going to be adding panels myself in the texture, the way this has a material applied to it. So I'm going to right click this, and I'm going to choose smooth shade. Now it is nice and smooth. Next thing I want to do is start to work on the material to this. So the material applied to the surface of this flying saucer. I'm going to change my viewport shading. Right now I'm just doing this bubble right here. I can view it as a wireframe. I can do this basic one, and then I'm going to use actually the very last one. And then that's going to give me a preview of what it would look like rendered. But I'm going to change my renderer. So I'm going to hit this little camera icon here, and I'm going to change the render engine from Eevee to Cycles. Now you might not notice a big difference right away, but we'll make some changes in a little bit that maybe you'll notice a bit more then. And then I want to apply that material. So I'm set my render engine, and I will set my material, but before I do that, I want to make sure that I'm setting my frame size as the right thing. So I'm going to click Output. Currently this is at HD output. For this project I'm working on, I'm not going to be using HD, I'm going to be using 4K DCI. So I'm going to change the resolution to 4096 for the X, and the Y, I'm going to make it 2160. That's 4K DCI. Now, if I wanted to see that, I could hit the camera, and then I can see the extent of that. So the 4K DCI is larger than HD. It's also wider than 4K UHD. So I have set my output settings for that. And again, I will get into this camera a little bit later. So I'm just going to rotate my view and punch in a little bit. So I'm zooming on the mouse. Now let me get to that material. So right now there is no material applied to this. I'm going to get my select tool so I don't accidentally scale it. And then I've got this selected, but I want to apply a material. I click this new from this little bubble here. That's material. Now it added a material, but this material is kind of plain. So I want to make this metallic. I'm going to grab metallic and I'm going to drag it all the way up to 1. So now it has a metallic surface. But that's not enough for this flying saucer. I want to do a lot more to this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up here to this little section here, and I get that little crosshair, that little plus sign. I'm going to click there and drag, and that gives me duplicate windows. But what I want to do is I want to put something else in this window. Instead of this object mode here and the layout, I want to change this environment from that 3D viewport, what I'm currently in, to the shader editor. So now this represents this right here. These are called nodes, and I can plug different wires in here and change the look of this surface by using nodes. It gives you a lot more control than just the basics of this surface right here. So in order to use nodes, I need to plug a few more things in there. First thing I want to do for this texture is I want to add some panels to this. So the first thing I'm going to do is try to get some panels. So I'm going to come up here and I'm going to go to add, and I'm going to search for brick. So I can go add, and then I can search, and I can type in brick. And I'm going to use a brick texture, and I'm going to put this right over here, and I want to plug it in. Now if I plug this color into the base color, then you'll notice I have this brick texture to this. And we can start with it plugged in right there, but we will be unplugging it and plugging it in somewhere else a little bit later. So I'm going to make some changes to this. The other thing is right now it does look like bricks, and I want those panels to emanate from the middle of this flying saucer. So I need to map it to this surface. So I'm going to go to add, and I'm going to search for mapping. And then I can click mapping, and I'm going to put this here. And then I can grab this line here and give me a little bit more space. And I can give a little more space here. But I want to take this vector and plug vector to vector. But now you notice that it got all black because it's not mapped on there properly. It doesn't have the right coordinates. So we need to give it the right coordinates, how it's mapped. So I'm going to go to add, and I'm going to search for coordinate, and then I can get texture coordinate and drag that down here. And then I'm going to take the UV and go to vector. And now that looks better. It is those flying saucer panels. But they're not the right size, so we will be making some changes to it. But I've applied the way this is wrapped around, almost like paper wrapped around that surface, and then we are using these mapping coordinates. So now UV to vector, and then that's all I'll have to do with that right now. I'm going to make some changes to the colors of this. So color 1, instead of being white, I'm going to click that, and where it says value, I'm going to just put 0.4. So they are closer in shading, a little bit different. I'm going to leave the mortar that same thing. Now when it comes to the scale of this, I'm going to change the scale to 2.8. Now it doesn't look great just yet, but I'm going to change also the size of these panels. I want this to seem like a really, really large ship, and I want the panels to look small when viewed from far away, so it'll make it seem even larger. So I'm going to make some changes to this. So I'm going to take that mortar size, instead of the default 0.02, I'm going to make that mortar size even smaller. I'm going to put 0.0005 and hit enter. Now you'll notice that they almost completely disappeared, and here though it says 0.001 because it's just not showing the whole thing. But if I click it, then I can see that it's 0.0005. I'm going to leave the mortar smoothing, and that bias, I'm going to change that bias to 0.2. 2. That's going to be important as I have different colors for the panels. And then the brick width, here I'm going to change that to 0.05. Now I have a lot more panels, but I'm going to change that height to 0.05 as well. Now I've got lots of panels. Now I could stop there, but I want to do more. I want this to react to light with bumpiness to these panels. In order to do that, I want to apply something called bump. So I'm going to go to Add, and I'm going to search for bump. And I'm going to get a little bump thing here. I'm going to put that down underneath here. And then I can take this brick texture, and I want to take the factor out of the brick texture and plug it into the height of this. Now, nothing has changed over here just yet because I need to take the bump normal and plug that into the normal of this texture here. So what's happening is it's taking this texture and it's putting it in the base color here, and it's going to the material output. That's what we see. And it's taking the factor, it's like a black and white representation of this, into the height, and it is putting it in here. And I'm going to leave that strength at 1 and distance at 1. And that's kind of the basics of getting that set. If I zoom in here, let's see if we can see much going on. We can't see much going on because we need to do more changes to this. But that is the basics. So we really can't see that bumpiness just yet. But the other thing that's happening is the bumpiness is actually being applied not to the panels, but to this mortar, which is the seams between our panels. So instead, I'm going to click Invert. Now we might notice a little bit of a highlight on those edges. And that's exactly what we need. Part of it is too where our light is. We're not getting a lot of cross light, so the light is just from above, so we're not seeing it affect that bumpiness just yet. But once we apply a different light to this world, it will look better. But like I said, we're going to be unplugging this in a little while because I want to add some texture to this, at least something that looks like a little bit dirtiness, some noisiness to this. So I'm going to go to the Add, and I'm going to search for Noise. And I'm going to get Noise Texture, and I'm going to put it above here. And I can put these wherever, but I'm trying to keep this a little bit neat so I can move these around. And I'm going to take this, and I would like to actually plug it in, but if I take this, I'm going to plug in the color here just so you can see it. But you see it is a bit noisy. It's not even, but it's kind of this rainbow color, and I don't want that. If I plug the factor in, then it's this black and white noise that I kind of want, but I actually want to combine it with this brick texture. So I'm going to unplug that, and right now the only thing it has is this base color. So my brick texture is unplugged, and this noise texture is unplugged. But I want to get that black and white and plug it into here, but I want to combine the two. So I'm going to go to the Add, and I'm going to search for Mix because I want to be mixing colors. So I'm going to choose Mix Color. I'll put that mix color here. And then I'm going to take the color of this, and I'm going to plug that color from the brick into B. And then the color of this, I would want to plug in here, but not just yet. Because if I do, well, actually, what I'll do is I will plug in this result, plug it into the base color, so you can kind of see. If I plug this color in, then you notice it's got that rainbow look. And I don't want to have that for this. I want this to look kind of grimy or dirty. So I'm going to leave it plugged in for right now. And I'm going to go to this Add, and I'm going to search for Ramp. I'm going to get a color ramp. And if I just kind of hover over with this and click, it plugs it in automatically. The color ramp also allows me to change the contrast of that. So I'm going to take this color ramp and I'm going to change that position to 0.4. Now it's a little bit better, but it might look a little bit too dirty for this, and I'm going to make some other changes. So I'm going to take this factor, how much it's mixing the two of these, and I'm going to lower that factor to 0.5. 0.292. 0.292. And now I've got this ramp here, I've got this, and then I have that texture applied to this. And I will also want to make some other changes to this noise texture because it's a little bit too large for it. So I'm going to take the scale, I'm going to punch in 12, and the detail, I'm also going to punch in 12 to that. And then that roughness, I'm going to crank that to 1. And now that is the finished texture for this. So let me move this so you can see it a little bit more and organized. So I'm taking the noise with these settings and I'm plugging the, right now I've got color into factor. I can actually take factor into factor, and that is going to work a little bit better. So factor into factor. I've got this ramp set at 0.4, and then I have that plugged into A, and then it is mixing those two colors at 0.92 or 0.292. Now those numbers can change depending on what you're trying to do. And then that result is plugging in here, and it's also taking these coordinates and taking all of these things and plugging them, the color into B, and then it's taking the factor, that black and white image of that, and plugged into the height of the bumpiness. And like I said, we'll notice that a bit more when we apply some light. And I'll move this one out so you can see it. And it's taking all of that information and putting it into the material output, the final thing, this material right here. So punch in a little bit more so you can see those settings. And again, keep in mind that this mortar size right now is showing that it's 0.001, but I'd actually punched in 0.0005. So it's even finer. And that is that. I'm done with that material, so I could name that material saucer, and then it is set. Though one thing I didn't do yet, which I probably should have done a long time ago, is I'm going to go File, and I'm going to choose Save As. And then I would save this wherever I've been saving things. So I have some other ones here, so I'm going to call this Saucer 3 for me. And then it adds the dot blend, so I'll click Save As. Now it's saved just in case I have a power outage and lose it, so then I can go back to it. Now I don't need this anymore, this panel, so I'm going to close this panel. So I'm going to hover over this and I get this little line. I'm going to right click and choose Join Areas. And then it says, well, which way do you want to join? Well, I want to join to the right. Newer versions also give you that option to join to the left or right. So I just have that arrow. So I'm going to punch out a little bit, look around, and then I can see that basic flying saucer. Next thing I want to do to this flying saucer scene is I'm going to be compositing this into something a little bit later, but I want to add some lighting to this that is similar to the lighting in the scene that I have filmed. So I don't want this world lit the way it is. I also want to set up my camera. So I'm going to click Camera. Like I said, I was going to be going over the camera a little bit later. So this is, now I'm viewing from my camera. If I want to view from my camera and actually control my camera, if I hit this, and then I hit N on the keyboard, and it brings out this little drawer here. Otherwise, if you just click this little arrow, you see that little arrow right there? I click that, and then I'm going to click the View tab. And then I'm going to choose, if I pull this out so you can see, Camera to View. Now, I'm actually controlling the camera when I am holding middle mouse button or zooming in and out, so I'm controlling what the camera sees. We're going to do some more with that later. And if I uncheck that, now I'm no longer controlling the camera. I'm zooming in and out of what the camera has. So sometimes that can be a little bit tricky where I don't notice that I'm controlling the camera, I'm not controlling the camera, but that's that little setting right here. But if I want to view from the camera, you hit that camera right there. Now I'm viewing from the camera, and if I zoom in and out, you can see I'm viewing from the camera. I can see the edges of my frame. So what I like to do is zoom out so I can see the edges of my frame like that, and then click Camera to View, because that way I know what's all around. I'm seeing the extent of that view. Okay, next thing I want to do is, like I said, add those lights or the light to the world. So I'm going to use something called an HDRI image, and that's going to illuminate this as though it is illuminated with light all the way around from an actual scene. So I want to change the color to that from this gray world to an HDRI image. So I click the world button right here, and then instead of this color, I'm going to click this little dot, and I'm going to choose environment texture. When I choose environment texture, now it gives me this magenta screen. That's because it says, well, there's nothing plugged in here. So it doesn't know what it should look like. So I need to click open, and I'm going to open an image. Now Blender actually comes with some HDRI images, and they're not a really high resolution, but they are in there. So in order to find them, on the Mac, a little bit more confusing. If you're on Windows, you would just navigate to where Blender is stored and then you'd be able to find it. But on the Mac, it's a little bit hidden. So I can click Macintosh HD, and I'm going to go to this filtering here, turn this filtering off. But I do want to make sure that Show Hidden is on, because then I can actually see some of the things that it would hide normally. And I'm going to go to my Applications folder, and then I'm going to look for Blender. Now, if I click Blender, this is actually a folder. I can't actually see what's inside there. So if I double click it, then still it didn't do it. So I'm going to hit that folder again, and instead of this Applications, where it just says that right like that, I am going to again go to this, make sure that Show Hidden is on, and then I'm going to look in Macintosh HD, Applications, and then I'm going to be looking for Blender. But for some reason or another, it's not showing up right now. I need to turn off that filtering. That's why, because it is filtered. So I'm filtering, saying, well, I don't want to see certain things. So I turn that filter off, then I can see the things that are hidden. So right over here, Blender, but I don't want this. I actually want Applications, and then here, I'm going to type in Blender. This is a little trick to get there. I'm going to type in blender.app/contents. Then what it's going to do, if I hit enter, is it allows me to get into that. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to get into it. So that's a little bit of a trick on a Mac. If you want to get into that, then you add a /contents and hit enter, and now we're actually in that Blender app folder because it is a package. So then I'll show you how to navigate to it. I know it's a little bit tricky, but if you had an HDRI image from somewhere else, you can just do that. But I just want to use the built-in HDRI images. So from contents, now I'm in that. I'm going to go to resources, double click, and this is the current version of Blender that I'm using. I know there's a newer version, but this computer just has 3.6, so I'm just using that. So if I double click that, and then I'm now in that 3.6 folders, then I'm going to go to data files, and then I'm going to go to this thing that says Studio Lights, and then I'm going to go to the one that says World. Double click that, and now these are different HDRI images that I can use. And I'm going to use the sunrise one, and I'm going to click that and then click Open Image. And now I've got that image in here. It's not real high res, but it does have the light information that I need. Now if I hold middle mouse button, and I'm going to set my view to kind of about like this, and I know that it's got this low res in there. It doesn't matter because I'm actually not going to export it with that low res background, but I am going to get all of that light from this 3D world, or this 3D image, not 3D, but 360 image, and apply it. You'll notice as I rotate around that this is responding to the light of that image around it. And that's really what we want with this HDRI image. But for the scene that I'm going to be compositing in, the light is coming not directly from behind it. It's kind of a front lit scene that I'm going to be compositing this into. So I'm setting up the way I want my the way I want my shot. I'm holding middle mouse button, and shift, kind of move around and kind of find the angle. So because for this, I want this ship to be flying in and kind of ominously above. And the thing that I'm going to composite into has some foreground elements here. But there, now you're actually seeing some of that lighting and that bumpiness be important. You see the way it is lit. I see some bump here and some highlights here. And that adds a bit to the realism. So I am nearly finished with this. Next thing I want to do is do a little bit of animating. I want to animate this because I want the ship to kind of fly in and also rotate a little bit. So this animation is only going to be 120 frames long. So here in this timeline section, the end, I'm going to punch in 120. And then now it ends right here at 120. So this is kind of where I want it to end, but I'm going to get to how to animate this. So first thing I want to do is I don't want to be viewing from the camera view for right now. So I'm going to hit this Z at the top. Now I'm not viewing it from the camera, even though this says camera to view. I'm not actually viewing from the camera. I'm viewing from this top view. But if I hold the middle mouse, then I can orbit around. I'm going to leave the camera there because I'm not going to animate the camera. I'm going to orbit around and I can kind of take a look at that, what that looks like, but I actually want to view right from the top. I'm going to punch out a little bit. And what I want to happen is I want this flying saucer to fly toward the camera. So where do I want it to begin? Well, I'm going to go ahead and hit this button for auto key. That means it's going to add a keyframe. If I make a change, it's going to add a keyframe about where something is or what its properties are at a given point in time. It hasn't added that key yet because I haven't changed anything. But I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take this flying saucer. I'm going to get the move tool and I'm going to move it just on this axis. So I'm moving it back a little bit. So I've moved it back. Now all of a sudden you'll notice that it has added a key there. I'm not going to make any other changes just yet. I'm going to hit the camera. And so the camera right now has it starting further away. So that's perfect where I want it to start. So then what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab this slider and I'm going to go to the end of my animation, the end of time, to 120. And then I'm going to make some changes again. I want that closer to the camera. Now, what I could do is I could come over here and I could make some changes to the location. So I moved that. I can actually take that location and green indicates that, hey, there's keyframes that are before this. I'm going to change that. If I change that to 0, now it is back to where I started earlier, which is perfect. So I started with it way back here, and now you'll notice that it is moving in. Now the reason it looks kind of pixely is because Blender hasn't fully rendered it. It's just giving me a preview. So when you hit play, don't freak out over it. It is just a preview. It's not your final. Spacebar on your keyboard is the play button, or you can hit this play button here. Now I want to go back to the beginning of time. If you drag too much, you can go before the beginning of time, and that'll take you to 0. We don't want to be at 0. We begin at frame 1 is how we do that in Blender. So starting at frame 1, and we are ending at frame 120. Now, like I said, I wanted to add some rotation. At the beginning of time, I'll have no rotation. So I'm just going to jump to the end of time, and I'm going to change that Z rotation. I'm going to change that to -40. And now it actually rotates. Now, because this isn't rendered, it's hard to see that rotation. So, excuse me, I'm going to go ahead and click this wireframe mode. So then I can actually see what it looks like rotating. And then I see that rotation to the flying saucer. So I can go back to my rendered view and go to the beginning of time, and I am almost set to export this. So next thing I need to do is just change how this is going to be exporting. I've already set to Cycles Render Engine. I've already set my size. I'm also doing it at 24 frames per second for this particular project because the video I am putting this into has a time base of 24 frames per second. Then I'm going to do a few more changes. Right now it's going to this temp folder, and that's really the wrong place for this. So I don't want to go to this temp folder. I hit that folder, click that, And then I'm going to go to my recent because I've been working in this other one. And I'm going to right click and choose new folder. And then I'm going to call this saucer renders. Then I select saucer renders and then I click accept and accept and then double check. Is it temp or is it saucer renders? It is saucer renders. I also want to make some changes here. Currently it is doing a PNG, which is what I want. And I'm going to be exporting not a video, but individual frames. But I don't want any compression. So I'm going to take that compression to 0. And then I'm done in this little section here. And I'm going to go to these render properties one more time. And I'm going to scroll down into this. And I'm going to look for the arrow next to film. And I will expand that. And I'm going to scroll down. And then I'm going to click transparent. And what that will do is it will export this flying saucer animation with transparency, with no background. Because like I said, I'm going to be putting this into another video. So I don't want any background in this. So I'm just exporting it with no background. And then I can put that in my video. And now I'm pretty much ready to render. I have set all of my settings, gotten rid of that compression, and got it at the right size. And also, I have made it at 40 max samples, and then also transparent. One more thing I want to do is I don't need this light because I have that environment texture that is around that. So I'm going to select that light, hit X, and now that light is gone from the world. I have the environment texture that is lighting my scene. So I'm not using that light. So I have just the camera and the sphere. And that's it. Now I am going to just do one more Command S to make sure I've saved that. And I'm ready to export. So I have set it to the right place. It is going to saucer renders and I'm ready to export. So to export this, we're going to exporting it as single frames. So I'm going to go to render animation. And then it is going to render that. And you'll notice that it is doing just part of the frame right now because it's doing it in tiles. It's doing half or a little bit less than half. So it's rendering this section, then it's rendering this section. It's going to put it together and it's going to render a section up here. But it's going to be pretty fast. After it renders that one frame and denoises it, gets rid of the kind of speckly, noisy look, it is going to move on to the next frame. So currently right now I see frame 1 and now it says frame 2. It's already moved on to frame 2. Although it is going to do this relatively quickly, it's still going to take a bit of time. So a lot of times when you're rendering, you just hit render and then go do something else. So I'm going to pause this recording right now and come back when it is rendered and talk about what to do next. All right, so Blender has finished rendering this. Now it is finished frame 120. So I'm going to close that, and I can actually close Blender. I don't need that. So I'm going to open up Premiere and just put that together kind of quickly. So I'm going to start a new project, and I'll call this Saucer. And then I'm going to make sure I'm putting it in the right folder where I've got my other project. I'm going to ignore all of this in the middle and just click Create. And then double check that I'm in the right workspace, so editing workspace. And then I'm going to import here. I could click this or Command I or double click the gray area here, and then it brings this up. So I'm going to look for my saucer renders. I'm going to select the first one and then I'm going to click Show Options. And I'm going to tell this it is an image sequence. Then it's going to take all of these and make it into a single piece of video. So I click that, import, and there it is. Right now it says that it's 4 seconds, and you can kind of see it animating as I hover over that. I'm going to drag it into my, before I drag it into my timeline, I'm actually going to change this. I'm going to interpret this footage because it is assuming the wrong frame rate. So I'm going to right click it and choose Modify, Interpret Footage. And instead of using this, what it thought it was, I'm going to choose assume this frame rate, and that's 24. And then I click OK, and now you'll notice that it says it is 5 seconds. Now when I drag it down, there it is. It has my animation. And then I could take and I could layer this over any other video. I don't have any other video that I'm going to incorporate it in right now, but just to kind of show you that it is transparent, I can, maybe I'll just do bars and tone, click OK, and then I drop this underneath here. Then you can see, yes, it is transparent around that. And that is kind of the basics to this, using a procedural texture to create a material and also kind of a basic flying saucer. And like I said, this is a procedural texture, meaning it's based on math, and if I scale it up, scale it down, it still retains its quality. So it's not an image-based texture. Well, I hope this is helpful, and I also hope that you can continue to tell and live good stories.